Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics. In this video, I like to discuss the situation whereby a French supplier of medical face masks to the British NHS has been told to stop those supplies in order to keep stocks in France. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, then please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So, first of all, thanks for the heads up from John Finnegan on Twitter for pointing me to this report. I hadn't actually come across it myself, I have to say. Essentially, the NHS, when anticipating the onslaught of a certain health condition that's very newsworthy at the moment, that YouTube seem to not want me to talk about, the NHS ordered millions of face masks. Now, we don't manufacture them in the UK, so overseas we go. Great. A French company was fulfilling this order when the French government announced that it is buying up all stock in the country in the face of a global shortage. This is another reason why people shouldn't be using them when not needed, by the way. We personally face a real shortage, especially in this country. Now, the company director did note the difficulty in the situation, the sensitivity, I should say. On the one hand, the NHS did order the masks, and maybe some of you are thinking, hang on a minute, the NHS ordered the masks, they're the customer, what's going on? You know, not supplying them arguably makes them a bit unreliable. However, the French government have issued a requisition order. These things can be done in emergencies. Governments can do this in any country. We could do this in our country in the same situation. There have been reports of masks, for example, being stolen from hospitals in Paris and Marseille. I know in the UK, there have been reports of sanitisers being stolen from NHS hospitals as well in acts of moronic selfishness, which of course is putting many lives at risk. Naturally, this means that the relatively few NHS doctors that we still have will now be at much greater risk of being vulnerable themselves when treating patients. Despite Boris Johnson's insistence that the NHS is well equipped to cope, it is not at all. The NHS isn't even well equipped to cope before this emergency, which is now moving on from the containment phase to the delay phase. That essentially means that it can't be contained. So the focus is on slowing the spread to reduce the damage before it's finally exhausted. That is assuming that our Prime Minister will allow our health authorities to do that, but that's another topic. It is not a green light to panic, of course, just because we're moving on. It's panic that makes the situation much worse. I'll keep emphasising that. But the NHS can't even cope with the normal winter crisis that happens, well, every winter, and it's always a crisis because we don't have the resources to deal with it. Emergency beds that we used the previous winter were still in use throughout 2019, even during the quiet times, meaning no spare capacity for this winter to ramp things up. And that was before a certain pandemic was set loose. The idea that the NHS can cope with massive shortages of doctors, nurses, beds and now medical supplies is frankly ridiculous. And bear in mind that we are currently still in the transition period of leaving the EU. Yes, the French government has requisitioned some of our supplies. I could argue that that's what happens when Conservative governments kill off British manufacturing and steer us towards a service-based economy instead. But the fact is, we couldn't manufacture everything anyway, regardless. Even if we'd adopted better policies over the years, this may still have happened. This is not necessarily a direct consequence of that policy. But what it does show is how dependent we are upon supplies for things outside of the UK. And when I was responding last week, for those who remember, there's a video last week that was prompted by a question from a Brexit supporter saying, why can't we just cease all trade with the EU and manufacture the things we normally import ourselves? You know, the things we'd normally buy into the country, why can't we just make them ourselves? Here is the chance to see it writ large. We can't import the face masks we need. What now? Oh, should we just manufacture them ourselves? No, of course not. It's ridiculous. We can't. We haven't got anyone to do it. And what happens when we struggle to get imports after the transition period, thinking ahead to Brexit, that have nothing to do with foreign powers requisitioning them because of some global shortage? Just we can't get them in the country. We won't make them ourselves. We haven't the capacity. We'll do without. That's actually what we'll do. Just like now, we're going to have to do without unless we can find another supplier whose government isn't going to keep them in the country as well. And of course, that's going to delay things. I'll draw your attention to the fact that the NHS put this order in over a month ago now. Weeks ago. So even if we put in a new order with someone else, that just gives you a bit of an idea that it could take 2 or 3 months before we'd get it if there were no other problems. We're going to do without during the period when it's ramping up. We're going to do without. And when that doing without next year is doing without food and doing without medicines, what then? What then? So anyway, I hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, then please also click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.